Hey everyone, and welcome to the Unit 4 Screencast, Linear Equations in Two Variable. I'll just quickly describe some of the tasks herein. I will say generally for this unit that there you might need to spend a little bit more time than I think might be allotted for some of these tasks. And I say that not just because of the tasks, but there's a lot of scaffolding potentially required for this unit because there's a lot going on. This is one of those concepts that um, is probably worthy and ripe for some additional time being spent on it. So the calendar, as you can see, is listed at about a month, even slightly over. I would almost suggest that that might not be enough time, depending on how you guys do things and how much time you spend having students write and explain and things like that. There's a lot going on in this unit. That said, I think it's a really strong unit, and there's actually probably more scaffolding exercises involved in this unit than in most, which is good. The sort of other side of the coin is that you may have to modify some things, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So first of all, the first task is this is our task. Every unit we want to adhere to and attend to students' mathematical smartness and their abilities as mathematicians. And this is one of those tasks that could potentially do that. It's called 4-4s. It's one of those Joe Boiler low floor, high ceiling tasks. So you may need a full class day on it to do and then do some other things. I'd suggest the task maybe is worthy of half a day potentially, but I don't know. You can sort of take that and go as you will. The calendar, for some reason, there's a mess up there in Project Briefcase, and it's there and it can't be edited. So the problem one listed here, and I think the reason this is in the calendar listed as problem one is because it is sort of more of a remediation exercise as far as using slope-intercept form. Also, this is presented as GeoGebra, but it's quite possible that your students haven't done this in GeoGebra or haven't used GeoGebra yet this school year. This was probably designed before the advent of Desmos, which may be a more appropriate exercise for this. There's even, the possibility of using the good old TI graphing calculators as in one of the scaffolds. But you definitely take a look at this. I think there's some good stuff in here. You just may have to modify it for your platform of choice, I guess. Desmos, TI, GeoGebra, pencil and paper, all the above, whatever you guys have might affect how you facilitate this. So definitely give this a look through and be sure to go back and edit it if it needs it in your course. Then we get to our sort of big problem for the unit. In fact, this is probably borderline project and problem. This is our sort of our systems of equations problem. We want to find out where things intersect, but also do a lot more with this problem. We want to find out how do we know if two lines are parallel or perpendicular and so forth. And I think it's a really clever and interesting task. And actually, this task, if you Google, if you're sneaky, you can probably find a local newspaper article sort of interviewing the teacher that designed this task. Her name is Jessica, and it's a really creative task. I will say that the entry event is a little convoluted here. And I offered a couple possible alternative entry events or entry event ideas in the resource. So make sure you take a look at that. I think this is a really strong task. I think the entry document is a little too long, maybe convoluted and not clear. Essentially what students are going to be doing, and you need to go back and read the facilitation notes and problems at a glance, but essentially students are going to be looking at and designing football plays and using the football plays on a coordinate plane to talk about things like the equations of lines and where two lines intersect as if it were a crossing pattern in an NFL game, which is good because we're right in the middle of college and pro football season. So take a look at that. There's sort of hard copies like PDFs. I went back and redesigned these for Desmos. So this is an example of one of the plays there that uses Desmos. We'll get back to that in a second because there's two parts to this problem. In the middle of that, or I guess right after the first half of the problem, there is a formative assessment lesson. So definitely take a look at that. The facilitation notes are pretty long and exhaustive. So once again, pre-assessment, scaffolding, post-assessment. Make sure you do that. And then the second half of the problem, the NFL problem, is has to do with audibles, and this is where you can have students get really creative with some of these with the context here. So essentially, we want to design a play that allows for several audibles, and there's some fancy pants football terminology there that may help out. One of the suggestions for the entry event is actually to enlist the help of your football coach, if you have one, and have him or her come in and talk to your class and I don't know, talk about play design and actually solicit them to maybe talk about audibles and what you need to do and all this sort of terminology there. So do we want the audible to be perpendicular to the original route? Do we want two receivers to run parallel to each other? And how can we represent that mathematically? So take a look at this. Definitely have some fun with it. It's one, like I said, I really like, but probably requires your hand as a facilitator, depending on how comfortable you are with the terminology and things like that. And this is why I said, this may take more time than is possibly enlisted here. So, so definitely take a look at that and spend some time with it. And I would even suggest really getting into Desmos and thinking about making piecewise functions and things like that, because that'll be required here. Then we have another formative assessment lesson. This is one of the ones that gets really highly regarded. It's pretty straightforward. It's very clear, potentially, unlike the entry event that was just given. It's very clear in terms of the ask of students. So take a look at that one. Then we have another relatively straightforward and clear problem using the problem-solving framework on energy efficiency. It's a task that asks students to analyze the cost savings, or rather, when will the cost savings kick in for an expensive, low energy using light bulb versus a cheap but high energy using light bulb. So this is from a few years ago. You may want to go to your local hardware store, grocery store even, and check out the light bulbs you guys have there to see if they've gotten more energy efficient over the years. You may also need to do a little prep work ahead of time in terms of researching how much a kilowatt hour costs in your neck of the woods. And make sure that you understand the conversions, the sort of watt and then kilowatt hour units, because those can be kind of tricky. They're still tricky for me, frankly, in figuring out what exactly is a kilowatt hour. There's some extensions that I've seen teachers do with this problem where they talk about their own school, and they say, how much, if we did this for our whole school, what would the cost be to replace all of the incandescent light bulbs in the building and replace them with energy efficient ones? What would the cost be there? A quick energy audit wouldn't be too hard if you're just looking at incandescent light bulbs. Honestly, you could send students around to every classroom and count the number of incandescent light bulbs. I assume that the ones in your ceiling are probably not incandescent bulbs, although I don't really know. So you could even think about that in terms of like for your school, if you want to make it more localized or maybe more, I don't know, potentially more impactful, you could have students facilitate some sort of energy audit and use the idea of energy efficient and expensive light bulbs versus cheap and not energy efficient light bulbs, and when does the payoff occur, and like maybe how much annually will the building save in energy costs, or will the energy costs not kick in for a year or two because of the high cost of the energy efficient bulbs. Again, a lot of things you can sort of do with this problem. This problem is listed as optional, and I'd even suggest maybe not doing it unless you video your own facilitators and teachers doing this. If you have like a CrossFit nut or two at your school, and they know what a burpee is, that might be someone to go to do this video. I think it's a really clever idea. Unfortunately, we don't have Act 3. That was sort of lost in the ether. So that's why that's why it's sort of listed as optional. But I really like the idea in terms of having a sort of slow burpee doer. I don't know the right verbiage there. A slow burpier and then a fast burpier, and try to find out at what point do they cross. It's kind of like our squirrel guy problem. We have another FAL, another formative assessment lesson. This one's pretty fun. It's about combining inequalities and finding like regions and things like that. There's like a little treasure hunt kind of thing there. So that one's pretty fun and maybe a nice refreshing couple of days there. And then lastly, we have our college ready assessment, our CRAs. This is another one that could potentially use some updating because of gas prices and newer model cars. This is from a few years ago, and every year new cars get more and more energy efficient, and the hybrids and electric and the Teslas and all that. You may want to give this a little refresh in terms of an entry document. Sort of similar to the light bulb task, this has to do with more expensive cars that use a little bit of gas versus cheaper cars that uses more gas. And again, at what point does the energy savings do the energy savings pay off? And when does it become more cost effective to purchase or to have a energy efficient car versus a not energy efficient car? There is a lot of writing scaffolding provided for this CRA, so make sure you take that. There's some good stuff in there. And again, I sort of implore you, if you haven't had students do disciplinary writing, this is a sort of primo unit to do it. You could even consider starting small with the first few tasks, and then by the time you get to the CRA, you might have a lot of writing tools under your in your toolbox. So make sure to check that out. Like I said, the calendar may be giving some of this short shrift. I don't know, depending where you are on the year, I could envision the CRA taking you right through finals, because we have Thanksgiving coming up, and Christmas. The December is always sort of a mishmash of months. So this might take you through the end of the semester, give or take. But like I said, there's a lot of opportunities for remediation and for extension. And so I would really recommend you let your imagination fly with these problems. I think there's a lot of great kernels here that I think an adept facilitator such as yourself could really make into something special. So these are the problems given. I'd really recommend that you make them your own and make them your students, and spend time where you feel like you want to spend your time in your class, and feel free to skip over or move quickly through other tasks that you feel don't really meet your guys' students' needs. So good luck, and make sure to hop over to the discussion board, and I'll see you there.